My name is Daniel Harper, and even now at 55 years old, there's one ordinary evening from my past that still feels extraordinary every time I remember it. An evening that began with embarrassment and hunger and somehow turned into the moment my life finally changed direction. I was 37 back then, a single father raising my 6-year-old son, Noah, on my own after my wife, Emily, passed away suddenly from a stroke that no doctor saw coming, leaving behind a silence in our small apartment that felt louder than any noise. Life after that became a constant balancing act between grief, responsibility, and survival. And by the time this story took place, I was working 2 jobs, mornings unloading trucks at a warehouse and nights washing dishes at a diner, barely keeping the lights on and often falling asleep in my clothes before Noah even finished his homework. That evening was a cold Thursday in early winter, the kind where the sky darkens before dinner and the wind seems to cut through even the thickest coat. And Noah had been unusually quiet all day because he'd had a dental appointment that morning and endured it without complaining once, even when the dentist warned him it might hurt. And I'd promised him, foolishly and without thinking through the math, that we'd stop for a burger afterward as a reward. The burger place wasn't fancy, just a small neighborhood grill with flickering fluorescent lights and faded menu boards, but to Noah it might as well have been a 5-star restaurant. And as we stood at the counter, I pulled out my wallet and felt my stomach sink as I realized I had miscounted my cash, forgetting about the bus fare I'd paid earlier, leaving me short by just a few dollars, and I could feel that familiar heat of shame crawling up my neck as I counted the bills again, hoping somehow they'd rearrange themselves into something more. Noah noticed immediately, of course, because children always do, and he asked softly, "Is it okay, Dad?" And I forced a smile and told him we could come back another day, that I'd make eggs at home instead, watching his face fall just enough for me to hate myself for getting his hopes up. And as I turned to leave, the cashier already calling for the next customer, a calm voice behind us said, "Excuse me, let me take care of that." And when I turned around, I saw an older woman, maybe in her early 60s, with silver hair tucked neatly into a scarf and eyes that held no judgment at all, just quiet certainty. I tried to refuse, because pride is a stubborn thing when you're poor, but she smiled and said, "I've been exactly where you are, and tonight I can help, so please let me." And before I could find another excuse, she ordered 2 meals, extra fries, and chocolate milk for Noah, who looked at me like he'd just witnessed a miracle. We sat together at a corner table, and she introduced herself as Margaret Lewis, and over the sound of sizzling grills and clinking dishes, she listened as if my life mattered, while I awkwardly explained how things had been since Emily died, how Noah was my whole world, how I felt like I was failing him despite working myself to exhaustion. And she didn't interrupt or rush me, just nodded and asked questions that showed she genuinely cared. Eventually she told me her own story, about losing her husband young, about raising her daughter alone while working nights as a nurse, about knowing exactly what it felt like to count coins and pray no one noticed, and something in her honesty broke through the wall I'd built around myself, because for the first time in years I didn't feel like a charity case or a statistic. I felt seen. When Noah finished eating, Margaret reached into her purse and handed me a card, explaining that she ran a small nonprofit that helped single parents transition into stable employment, not through handouts but through training and mentorship. And I laughed bitterly at first, telling her I barely had a high school diploma, but she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Resilience is a qualification you can't teach, and you have it." And she invited me to visit her office the following week. No pressure, just a conversation. I almost didn't go, because hope can feel dangerous when you've been disappointed too many times, but Noah insisted, asking if the nice lady would be there, and when we showed up to that modest office building, I realized Margaret hadn't exaggerated, because the place buzzed with purpose and warmth, and she introduced me to people who spoke about their work with passion, people who'd once been where I was and now stood on steady ground. Over the next few weeks, she helped me enroll in a certification program for logistics management, arranged child care for Noah during evening classes, and even helped me secure a paid internship that didn't require me to destroy my body for minimum wage. And slowly, painfully slowly, life began to shift. There were setbacks, of course. Nights I fell asleep over textbooks, and mornings I questioned whether I was fooling myself. But Margaret checked in regularly, not as a savior, but as someone who believed I could stand on my own if given the chance, and that belief did something powerful inside me. 2 years later, I accepted a full-time position at a shipping company with benefits and predictable hours, and for the first time since Emily died, I felt like I could breathe without fear of everything collapsing. Noah grew into a confident teenager, one who never forgot that night at the burger place. And when he asked me once why Margaret helped us, I told him the truth, that sometimes people help because they remember what it felt like to need help, and because kindness, when passed forward, can change more lives than we'll ever know. Margaret passed away 3 years ago, peacefully in her sleep, and at her memorial service, I stood alongside dozens of others whose lives she'd quietly transformed, all of us connected by moments that looked small on the surface, but were anything but. And now, years later, I volunteer with that same nonprofit, mentoring parents who remind me painfully of my former self, people standing at counters counting bills and hoping no one notices their fear. Just last month, I saw a young father with his daughter hesitating outside a fast food place, and without thinking twice, I stepped in, paid for their meal, and watched his shoulders relax in a way I recognized immediately. And in that moment, I felt Margaret's presence more clearly than ever, because her kindness hadn't ended with her. It had multiplied, rippling outward through choices people like me continue to make every day. Life didn't become perfect, and it never will, but it became meaningful, and all of it traced back to one simple act. One woman choosing to see me not as a failure, but as someone worth investing in. And that is what I try to remember now, whenever the world feels too harsh or indifferent, that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is stop, notice, and say, "Let me help." Because you never know how far that moment might travel, or how many lives it might quietly change.